We were there to remember Joy MacDonald, who had lived the last years of her 90s in Mayflower in Brighton. I had known her since the early 1960s, and across the years she had come to St Michael's. On Friday I spoke of her courage in the way she lived, her kindness towards others, and her continual wish to live a worthwhile life in the world. But as I drove away afterwards, I thought I could have said 3 more things about her. I remembered the way she walked. Some people walk away angrily, walk away untidily, walk away from us in despair. But she walked towards people in a very characteristic way. I remember her voice and the caring way she spoke about people. And I remember her handwriting. Now, letters these days are predominantly done on the iPad or the computer, but she wrote letters in her handwriting. And her handwriting displayed her unmistakable personality. In the 1939-45 war, she was appointed to a management position in the banks. As soon as the war was over, the men returned, and her position had to be surrendered to the men. She accepted that with grace, adapted, and then took a leading role in establishing the Institute of Private Secretaries. And in that leading role, she did a great deal to change the way women would be perceived in the commercial and business world, how women would find new respect in their roles that they would play. So I read 2 poems, 2 of Marjorie Pies's poems that I've read here several times. One was on courage, of course. Call on courage when fear engulfs. It is provided in limitless loads. And the other, in a whole web woven of the being of the world, each of us has a place. In trying to find our place in the woven web of the world, we all meet other people. We come close, we move away. We connect, we disconnect. We engage, we disengage. We marry, we divorce. We discover other people can be so neurotic, and we quickly protest that we're not. But perhaps we all are. One acclaimed book on human relationships opens with the first chapter with such words: 2 people fall in love, make a mutual lifetime commitment, and begin to build a life together. Despite their positive feelings towards each other, their attempts to bring pleasure and meaning into each other's life, and the good wishes of family and friends, approximately 50% of those couples who marry end their relationships in divorce. 50% or more. And of those who sustain their relationships, approximately 20% appeared to be distressed and dysfunctional, with arguments and demands and discontent. Is it a good institution, you might say? Most relationships are faced with the question: is this a good match, or is it a mismatch? And some find that it was a match, that we wished it wasn't so. But we get by in a process of accommodation, devising generous misperceptions, moving into an acceptable way of being together as a couple, being together as parents. Marriage and coupledom. There it is. But that's only one aspect of our relationships in the world. Just this last week, a man was sentenced to 18 years jail for the way he treated his stepdaughters when they were children. Workplaces have the constant anxiety of how people treat each other. Are you bullying me? And so the threat of that charge is always hanging over the workplace. And then we find that international sporting bodies are unravelling lies and corruption and dysfunctional relationships. And we needn't look too far before we get into the churches, reluctantly catching up in some places with their double talk, with what they might have done, what they could have done, what they should have done to prevent certain things from happening and to help other good things to happen. How many of the churches so critical of what human beings do in relationships? How many of the churches have actually helped build better relationships, help people understand their relationships? But instead we stand back and throw stones at other people and the way they conduct themselves in their relationships. And then if we move on to the worldwide scene, in the international scene, what do we see? We see the way we handle each other, human beings to human beings. We meet violence with violence, bloodshed with more bloodshed, bellicose words with accelerated bellicosity. What is happening to us, human beings? We hear all the talk about the politics of international peace. Words, words, double words. We hear about the psychology of reducing conflict. And yet the psychologists and the psychoanalysts themselves are frequently caught up in conflict that they can't resolve sensibly or rationally. We hear about people tangling in the ethics of relationships. But nothing, do you realize, nothing is said about the theology of relationships. Is there a theology of relationships? There should be, perhaps, but we don't know what it is. When did you last hear anything spoken in the churches at large, if not in this place, about the theology of human relationships? We do know this, that at any level of society and human relationships, we hear people talking very, very eloquently about hate, about fear, about more violence, about power, about intolerance, about non-collaboration. Words of despair, words of conditional engagement. And so it goes on. We say, where are we heading and what is happening to us? Are they the only words we know? Pause for a moment and notice that the words of Jesus urge his listeners to be light, a light in the world, to have light in our whole bodies. Not part of our body, but the whole body. No trace of darkness. And of course we dismiss that altogether. We say that's unrealistic. So Goya's painting of himself, Billy Collins' poem that I read to you today. This man with a large hat on his head is a dramatic statement about light. In the background of the painting, you can see the sun is shining brightly. Why then does the artist see himself needing to wear this hat with this series of candles burning around the rim? He said he wanted more light to paint paintings for the world. He wanted people to see the importance of bringing light to the world. He wanted to draw attention to the stupidity of the painting, or perhaps to our stupidity, that so often we choose darkness to light. More light, he said, on himself, more light to do the task of painting himself in a better light. We all need to look at that and think about how we can paint ourselves and our relationships in a better light. Relationships and light often do not sit comfortably together. We keep things in the dark. We don't want people to know what we're doing in our relationships. We don't want people to know our shady, dark dealings. So how do these words sit with those words of joy and trust, of caring and love, of goodness and kindness? They all sound so unrealistic and irrelevant, even amongst church congregations. Why should I say that? We are human too, but somehow we think we perhaps could be listening to the theology of human relationships, but we don't know what that theology is. So we put all the words aside. Well, yes, we will today. Put them aside for a moment and focus on the people of our relationships, other human beings, ourselves, people and our passing contact, our continuing relationships, the people who we can't understand them, the people who carry so many contradictions, people who won't come clean and tell you what they're really thinking, won't tell you the story. What is the story? So many relationships, are they relationships really? They survive on uncertainty and supposition, on fear and farce. And then we hear, Jason has a friend in church, but he would never, ever take that friend to the football. Elspeth likes David's tastes in antique clocks, but she can't stand the way he eats his food. Or Malcolm has no friends at all, but visits 3 housebound older people every week. Relationships. Our uncertainty of things in our relationships. Here's what one couple said to me just this week. This is what he said to his wife. He said to his wife, in their own privacy, you know, after all our ups and downs and all our quarrels and conflicts, we're still together. So that must mean we do love each other, doesn't it? And she said, yes, it must. What do you think of that? Does that mean they love each other? There's no doubt about it that being satisfied with one's life is a fundamental concern of most people. But most people find that the behaviour of other people have a huge effect on life satisfactions, positively and, of course, negatively. Frequently, people have difficulty solving conflicts with each other, have difficulty letting go of old tangles that they've had, have difficulty soothing the wounds, have difficulty letting new light shine on the dark and destructive places. Well, it's not surprising when you come to think of it, because when were we ever taught? We never really understood our emotional propulsion, that emotional propulsion that rushes us into anger and despair. We never knew how to resolve our lost energy. We never learned the behaviour of recovering in our relationship. We were never aware that we could develop the capacity of what some people call an evolutionary adaptation. That's not possible for us because we never learned about it. So we travel along in half light and half darkness, claiming to be in the light, but walking in the dark. And so many people become neurotic. We're all neurotic, really. We are expecting and wanting and demanding something of a relationship that can't be received. We're demanding these things and we don't know how. No, we don't do much reciprocation. Some of us become neurotic as we surrender to our lesser self, to our negative self, to our angry self, to our injured self. Or it might only be for a time. We might come out of it and go back into it, out of it and go back into it. And we do. So people become neurotic as they refuse to accept the reality of the present, believing it should be built on what was long since lost in the past. We don't know how to intercept our neuroticism. Things start to happen and we start to continue to build on our complaints or our demands or whatever, our memories, and we need someone to intercept at that point and say, stop there. Because if you don't stop there, it's going to span out, expand and escalate. And what's more, it's going to become very infectious. It's like feeding the chooks. The more you feed, the more the chooks come in. Feeding the birds, the more you throw food, the more the birds come from many places. So with our neurotic behaviour. If we don't intercept it and know how to intercept it, it keeps on feeding itself. So what will we say and do with our relationships? Where does a strong existential awareness meet a strong psychology of relationships and a strong theology? We need them all. We do need that awareness that's there for us, waiting for us to develop. The awareness, being there. You're present, so be aware. Then we need the psychology of relating to another person. And then we could add to that the theology of relating to other people. Now, I know many people say, that's out of the question. So I'm going to put to you 3 principles for a start. 3 principles. The first, the principle of listening to yourself. Listening to yourself. And what you want to get out of life and what you will give to life. Listen to yourself. Your higher self, and what life is giving you. The higher self. Listen to the healing of yourself and the ways of hope and wholeness. Listen to the dialogenic factors, those factors that open up dialogue, that lift you out of your smallness and your closed-off state and your narrow state, and release you to a larger life, a larger self. So that's the first principle, listening to yourself. Second, the second principle, listen to the other. Indeed, listen to the many others. If you're only listening to one other, that's a very restricted otherness. Listen to many others. And listen to the stimulation that they bring. Listen to the softening, healing influences of the other and the many others. Listen to the voices of what I call reshape-a-lessons, of reshaping your life, of healing and renewal. Listen to what is given to you. One of the great givens coming from other people. That was principle number 2. Principle number 3 is listen to the many voices of life and the world, the larger world. So instead of saying, there's nothing for me, I'm pulling the blankets over my head, I'm closing the door, open the doors. What is one of the first major factors in the 7 factors of personality? Openness. Openness. Be open. We can be so intensely bothered about our own self and what other people are doing to us that we neglect the enlargement and the enhancement that comes to us from the outer world, from these windows, from Mingary, from the gardens around this church, from your gardens, from the sky, from the trees, from the birds, the larger world. We look for a freedom that will release us to love ourselves and draw us out of ourselves and to love others for who they are rather than what they're meant to do for us. We look for the invitations to grow and to discover a stronger self, a bigger self, a self always calling beyond itself, calling beyond the lesser self to the possible larger self. So from those three listening principles, I'm going to move to some specific concerns that will bring the psychology and the religion, health and wholeness into an active togetherness, active service for our relationships. Follow me as I do it. First, we know that our relationships can run out of interest and energy. In short, they can become stale and boring. But we also know that a spontaneous renewal of interest and energy can occur. A spontaneous flow can take place. And we also know that sometimes a relationship is so damaged or so flat, it needs some kind of resuscitation. So that's possible. But then we come to the reality that resuscitation may not be possible. We may not be able to bring this relationship to life. We may not be able to change it. The relationship is ended. So this first concern is for us to examine the reality, to study the reality and adapt to that reality. That's the task. That's the task of psychology. That's the task of theology. Otherwise, you become stunted in your growth, in your adaptation, in the way you can live life in all its fullness. That's what religion says, isn't it? How to live life in all its fullness. So we need to leave certain things behind. We need to intercept certain things. Or we need to be open to the flow of spontaneous energy. The reality of that self-examination, number one. Number two is to choose. Choose carefully. Choose carefully to be self-protective so that you find relationships that are not only self-protective but are self-enlarging. So look for relationships that are stimulating, that will enlarge your personality and your relationships, that will heal and soften and soothe your soul when it needs to be healed and soothed and softened. Now, those qualities come from different relationships, not just one relationship, many relationships. So we then need to make sure we avoid those relationships that are destructive and draining. Take action accordingly. Reduce your exposure to those people and those relationships that believe in the dead weight of life, that believe in the darkness of relationships. Look for relationships that will contribute to the lightness of being. Be active in reducing your own neurotic behavior, because sticking to the one pathway is, when you know it is destructive, when you keep repeating destructive behavior, that is very neurotic, and you need not be so. So that's the second thing. It was to really choose your relationships that are enhancing and stimulating. Third, it follows. Look to your environments. Your environments are very important. The environments that keep you alive, that boost your sense of enjoyment in life, that give you a sense of, this is good to be alive. We know some environments, some circumstances can be very heavy going. part of our task in life is to see if we can lift those environments and help them to be open to a new injection of life. Openness to life is a major key in this whole matter. The garden rose is a case in point. The rose, as you walk along the street, the rosebud is closed. The rose is not there of your doing, it's just there. The rose has a presence in somebody else's garden as you walk by. Is the rose there for you? Of course it is, if you have eyes to see it. So the rose, its buds are closed. But then as you walk past it another time, the rose has opened. And when it opens, it brings a delight to every passerby. And it sheds a perfume which is so beautiful that we wish we should not miss it. So it's a parable, I think, of human relationships and human beings. We can be so closed that we don't want to see anything. Little excitement. But in the openness of the world, the rose brings multiple transformations to the surroundings. And so it happens with human beings also, by being open. In the mood of Martin Buber, the researchers from Strathclyde University wrote this: openness to others, openness to otherness requires that I must bring to the encounter a genuinely unfinished openness. Questions, uncertainties, and areas of unknowing through which the otherness of the other can have room to emerge. So I need to be open to the otherness of the other, to allow the other to do its work for me and to help me be open to others. So we look for these to fulfill this goal, to recognize, number one, to recognize the reality of the complexity and the potential of your relationships. Number two, to make sure you find and you choose stimulating, healing, enriching relationships and that you contribute to them. And number three, look for environments that keep relationships alive, environments that are open to that new injection of life. Celebrate those environments and contribute to them. Look for people who will help you discover and be your best self. Not a self turned inwards and all preoccupied with self-needs so much, although self-needs are important, but a self that is enhanced by a genuine dialogue with a higher self, with others, and with the wider world. Would you please stand? Jesus of Nazareth met his disciples and opened them to a different world with each other, a different world beyond them, and a different world with the eternal other. And so he said, remember to pray. And when you pray, say, Our Father. And we say that prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And the blessing. May the God you see in all the colours of creation arouse in you a sense of awe and wonder. May the God who is a sacred presence be real to you. May the God who is a source of inspiration and courage keep calling you forwards. May your God go with you and bless you today and always.